Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
Today, we're doing a really critical deep dive. We're looking at a topic that's, well, it's everywhere, but it stubbornly resists being seen as a coordinated system.
And that topic is systemic misogyny, specifically how it's expressed and amplified through what's known as the manosphere.
Yeah, and the central problem we're unpacking today, and this is really based on the work of Laura Bates, is a crisis in perception itself.
It really is. I mean, think about it. When there's an act of misogynistic violence, especially when the attacker is a white man and the targets are women, what's the first thing we hear?
Oh, it's a predictable script. He was disturbed, deranged, a lone wolf.
A lone wolf, exactly. The language is all about isolation.
And what's just as important is the language we don't use, the words we just refuse to apply.
Such as?
Terrorism, radicalization, extremism. Even when an attack involves mass murder and it's done with a documented intention to create terror against a specific group, women.
That refusal to name it, it has consequences. It prevents us from seeing toxic masculinity or, a connected anti-female ideology as a real factor.
It absolutely does. It frames the person as a total aberration, an outlier, like they just acted in a complete vacuum.
Which makes prevention almost impossible. How do you prevent something you refuse to define?
Exactly. But our source for today, Laura Bates's book, Men Who Hate Women, argues that these movements are anything but isolated.
Right. She presents it as an interconnected digital ecosystem, one that's basically designed to capture, groom, and then mobilize people.
So our mission for this deep dive is to follow her analysis. We're going to examine the manosphere not as, a random collection of fringe opinions, but as a structured digital system.
We'll be looking at the digital structures, the narratives they use, and the incentives, financial and social, that radicalize men.
And we'll see how these ideologies get pushed from, as she puts it, the internet's murkiest corners into the mainstream.
The very fabric of our shared consciousness. It's a powerful and pretty unsettling premise. So, to really get this, I think we have to start with the author, Laura Bates, herself. Her own journey is so tied to the book's thesis.
It really is. She's a journalist, and back in 2012, she started something called the Everyday Sexism Project.
And the idea was incredibly simple, wasn't it?
Deceptively simple. It was just an anonymous online space for people, mostly women, to share their daily experiences with sexism. Small things, big things, just everyday experiences.
An innocuous idea.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
But the reaction was anything but. The project just immediately unleashed this violent, years-long flood of abuse, all directed at her personally.
And we're not just talking about, angry comments online.
Oh, no. This was on another level. She documented credible death threats, really sophisticated hacking attempts, organized campaigns of harassment.
I remember reading that people would show up at her events.
Physically show up, yeah. Handing out flyers, calling her a liar. And there were even these handwritten, personalized notes left inside copies of her books in stores.
What did they say?
Warning readers that women lie about rape. It was a physical manifestation of one of the manosphere's core paranoias right there on bookshelf.
That kind of coordinated, relentless hostility just for giving women a space to talk, that had to be a sign for her.
It was the first clue. This wasn't just random anger. This was an organized, active hostility that was hiding in plain sight, ready to mobilize against any perceived threat.
So initially she believed what a lot of people believe, that talking about these groups just gives them the oxygen of publicity.
Right. The default position is always ignore them and they'll just fade away.
So what was the turning point? What made her realize that was the wrong approach and decide to write this book?
It came from her work in schools. For years, she was traveling around the UK talking to young people about sexism. And over a 2-year period, she noticed this radical shift.
A shift in the boys' reactions.
A profound one. Their responses went from maybe curious or a bit skeptical to just deeply angry and resistant.
And the scary part was the uniformity of it.
Exactly. Boys in completely different schools. She talks about a school in rural Scotland and another in central London. They were using the exact same words.
Quoting the same false statistics.
Verbatim. Arguing that men were the real victims, that feminism was the true oppressor. It was undeniable proof of some kind of coordinated outside influence.
They weren't coming up with this on their own.
No, they were repeating narratives they were being fed online. And that's when she realized the rhetoric wasn't staying in those murky corners. It was being repeated verbatim by respected politicians and mainstream news pundits.
The labyrinth had sprung a leak.
A massive one.
Yeah.
And that discovery really leads to the book's central thesis, which is that the manosphere operates as a radicalizing system.
And she breaks that system down into a few key parts, right?
Yeah, three-part mechanism. First, it identifies vulnerable men, guys who are frustrated, lonely, maybe not feeling successful.
Then what?
It reframes that grievance. It tells them their personal pain isn't their fault. It's systemic persecution by women or, feminazis.
Right.
It validates everything they're feeling.
And the third part is recruitment.
Recruitment. It offers belonging, a community, a cause. And crucially, it systematically normalizes violence against women, usually by packaging it in humor or irony to make it more palatable.
And that structure, that three-part machine, is what we have to start seeing as a system of extremism. Okay, so let's dig into the system itself, the manosphere. It's not one single group, is it?
Not at all. It's a huge, sprawling network. You've got forums, YouTube channels, blogs, private chat rooms. It's a whole digital confederation.
But they all share a worldview.
A violently anti-feminist one,
Yeah.
yes. And the common thread, the initiation ritual for almost all of these subcultures, is the idea of taking the red pill.
The red pill, of course, from the Matrix. What does that mean in this context?
A really powerful metaphor for them. It means waking up to a perceived reality, a sudden, shocking realization.
The truth they've been missing.
The truth that everything society has told you is a lie. It tells the guy who feels lonely or unsuccessful that he's been tricked into thinking he's in control.
When in reality.
In their reality, women are the ones who are overwhelmingly privileged, and men are the true victims of a feminist system that's stolen their power.
That is an incredibly cynical but, wow, a very effective tactic.
It's a perfect psychological trap. If you're carrying any kind of grievance, a lost job, a bad breakup, the red pill instantly tells you, it's not your fault, it's her, it's all of them.
It replaces any need for self-reflection with just blame. And it offers this immediate sense of superiority. You're one of the few who gets it.
Exactly. And it's especially sticky for the demographic Bates talks about. Men who feel like they're losing their traditional status in the world. It confirms their sense of entitlement.
Okay, so let's map this ecosystem. The first and maybe most extreme subculture she details are the incels, involuntary celibates.
Yeah, the incel community is probably the most visible and, frankly, terrifying part of this. It's defined by this intense misogyny that's born out of sexual and social frustration.
It starts as a kind of support group for lonely men,
Right.
right? But it turns toxic.
Very quickly. It indoctrinates them into believing that their failure is predetermined, and that women are, quite literally, the enemy, the cause of all their suffering.
And within the incel community, the dominant ideology is something called the black pill.
Right, that's what about 90% of the community subscribes to. The black pill is this aggressively defeatist ideology. It's rooted in genetic determinism,
Meaning
meaning they believe the genetic lottery is fixed. Your looks, your height, your jawline determine everything. And if you lost that lottery, you're doomed to celibacy forever. No amount of self-improvement can fix it.
And that belief is crucial because it justifies everything else.
It justifies their complete lack of personal responsibility and lets them channel all of their rage outwards.
Towards attractive men, who they call Chads, and attractive women, Stacys and Beckys.
But that rage doesn't just stay as online complaints. It very quickly translates into explicit, terrifying calls for violence.
The forums are full of it.
Rife with it. Graphic rape fantasies, encouragement of mass murder, debates about legalizing rape. Users will boast about sexual attacks and encourage each other to carry out the incel rebellion.
The day of retribution.
That's the one. Planned massacres. And they have this chilling shared mantra. All females deserve our utter hatred.
This brings up a really complex point that Bates makes about victimhood. These are men in desperate situations, but they're also advocating for horrific violence.
It's profound cognitive dissonance. The anecdote about the user Alex really shows this.
Tell us about that.
Well, Bates created this profile to immerse herself in these spaces, and she documented this user, Alex. He was dealing with intense hardship caring for a disabled parent, childhood abuse, total isolation. He genuinely found a community there.
But at the same time,
The same user, moments after talking about his pain, could casually write something like, "Rape is the alpha method of pleasure and procreation." He was simultaneously a victim, looking for connection, and an extremist advocating for criminal violence. The manosphere weaponizes that victimhood to justify the hatred.
Okay, so from the extreme of incels, let's move up what you might call the chain of respectability. The pickup artists, or PUAs. This is a multi-million-dollar industry.
And it thrives on the exact same male grievance. The PUA industry targets shy or insecure men and promises them a formula for success with women.
But the training is essentially a manual for harassment.
For harassment, stalking, and even sexual assault. Their courses are expensive, they sell out, and the gurus, some of whom have openly advocated for legalizing rape, charge thousands for this instruction.
And what's fascinating is how they package it. They use all this pseudo-scientific jargon.
Oh yeah, they dress up the misogyny in the language of like corporate management or self-help. Men are taught to see women not as people, but as objects or problems to be solved. Or in one case, dogs to be trained.
It's pure dehumanization.
It is. They sell it as a foolproof recipe for sex, talking about identity-level change at the cellular level. It's nonsense, but it sounds scientific. They tell men to ignore what a woman says and only pay attention to her primal, nonverbal cues.
And the techniques themselves, they're so specific. Bates connects them directly to experiences women report all the time.
You see things like kino-escalation, which is a system for increasing non-consensual physical contact, or going caveman, aggressively escalating, like grabbing a woman or throwing her on the bed. They explicitly teach men to isolate a woman from her friends.
Like a predator separates a gazelle from the herd.
The language is exactly that. So if you've ever had that experience with the guy who just won't take no for an answer, who keeps pushing boundaries, there's a good chance he's following a PUA script.
Okay, so after PUAs, we get to men going their own way. MGTOW. Their philosophy is basically isolationism.
Total separation, yeah. MGTOW guys have decided to completely avoid relationships with women. They're focused on what they call self-ownership and escaping a legal system they see as gynocentric.
And there are levels to this, right?
4 levels. It goes from just taking the red pill to avoiding long-term relationships to avoiding even casual ones. But level 3 is where it gets really political.
That's level 3.
Economic disengagement. They're encouraged to minimize their income and tax payments to avoid supporting the gynocentric state. So, no money for welfare or services that might help single mothers.
It's a political axe, then, based on this deep-seated fear that women are, what, predators?
Exactly. The core fear is that women are lying vipers, especially when it comes to false rape accusations or divorce court.
The irony, as Bates points out, is that for a movement about getting away from women, they seem to be feverishly obsessed with, well, women.
Constantly. And this isn't just a fringe idea anymore. It has penetrated the mainstream. Bates uses the example of the Pence rule.
Vice President Mike Pence's rule about never dining alone with a woman who isn't his wife.
That is a direct public manifestation of the core MGTOW fear. The belief that women are an inherent risk that needs to be managed through segregation.
And the MGTOW forum celebrated that.
They absolutely did. They saw it as their worldview being legitimized at the highest level of government. It normalized their paranoia.
So finally, in this ecosystem, we have the men's rights activists, the MRAs. Bates calls them a crucial gateway.
Yeah, the respectable face of the manosphere. MRAs are interesting because they split from the original male liberation movement in the 70s, which was about deconstructing harmful masculinity.
MRAs went the other way.
The complete opposite direction. They argue that men are the real oppressed gender. They take legitimate male issues, suicide rates, life expectancy, and they distort and weaponize them against women and feminism.
How does that distortion work? Can you give an example?
A classic one is comparing male unemployment to the rape of women, suggesting they cause the same level of humiliation. It's a deliberate tactic to minimize the violence of rape while framing men as the primary victims.
They use male suicide rates not to campaign for better mental health services for men,
but to attack things like the Violence Against Women Act. Their goal is rarely to actually help men, but to undermine support systems for women.
And because they use this pseudo-academic language, they manage to get a mainstream platform.
That's why they're such a crucial gateway. It allows their leaders to go on the BBC or breakfast television to debate feminists. This creates a false equivalence between their hateful rhetoric and genuine activism, sanitizing it for a mainstream audience.
And things like funded propaganda, like the Red Pill documentary, help scrub it clean.
Exactly. It's presented as a balanced look at men's issues, but it's funded by the very extremist groups it's platforming. And that's how vulnerable viewers get led down the path from MRA talking points into the more extreme parts of the manosphere.
Okay, so those are the ideologies. Now we need to talk about the tools, the actual systems of radicalization. And it seems like we have to start with Gamergate.
Gamergate was the proving ground. It's where trolling evolved from just isolated shitposting into organized, tactical mass harassment. And it's where the link between misogyny and the alt-right was really forged.
It all started with a revenge post from an ex-boyfriend against a female game developer, Zoe Quinn.
A debunked claim, it's important to say. But the story was irrelevant. The response was what mattered. It spiraled into this unprecedented campaign of terror.
Death threats, doxing. She had to leave her home.
And it quickly spread to other women in gaming, like Anita Sarkeesian. She had rape threats, hacking attempts. They even made an online game where you could punch her face.
And Bates points out that this was competitive. The trolls were trying to one-up each other.
They were. They would document their abuse to impress each other, which just incentivized more and more extreme behavior.
And they used specific tactics, like brigading.
Brigading, yeah. Coordinated mass attacks from forums like 4chan to overwhelm a person's social media and force them offline. But at the same time, they used the classic manosphere strategy.
Which is?
Claiming to be the real victims.
Right.
They weren't harassers. They were protecting their culture from feminazis. They framed their abuse as moral self-defense.
And Gamergate was the launch pad for figures like Milo Yiannopoulos.
Absolutely. It accelerated the careers of key provocateurs who learned how to monetize controversy and outrage. Gamergate taught the manosphere how to organize and how to use digital tools for real-world ideological warfare.
Which brings us to the platforms and algorithms that accelerate all of this. The YouTube rabbit hole.
It's a system that feels like it was perfectly designed to reward manosphere content. The algorithm prioritizes long watch times and high engagement.
And outrage drives engagement.
Outrage is the fuel. So their content, which is often racist, misogynistic, anti-immigrant, gets pushed higher and higher. And because they don't have to fact-check anything, they can churn out thousands of hours of it.
And research has shown that the algorithm doesn't just respond to what you search for, it actively nudges you.
It's passive, algorithmic radicalization. You can start by watching something pretty neutral, like a video on political history, and within a few clicks, YouTube's recommendations can lead you down this spiraling rabbit hole to extreme right-wing and misogynistic content.
Without you ever actively seeking it out.
And since YouTube's audience skews young and male, it's essentially an automated indoctrination machine for a very susceptible demographic.
And the platforms themselves seem to have total impunity.
Well, they hide behind freedom of speech, but their business model actively profits from amplifying hate. Bates points out how resistant they are to even common sense fixes like flagging obvious brigading campaigns.
And the response when victims report threats is, well, it's often an automated message.
An automated email saying that explicit death threats don't violate our community standards. These are multi-billion-dollar companies. They have the resources. They choose not to use them because it might disrupt engagement.
The system is working as designed.
Exactly. It's designed to maximize engagement, and the ideological cost is just collateral damage.
And all of this allows for what Bates calls the chain of normalization, the process that moves fringe ideas into the mainstream.
This is the real systemic genius of it all. It's a chain. It starts with the extremist fringes, the incels advocating rape. Then it moves to direct leaders like Paul Elam, then to online provocateurs like Milo.
Then to go-betweens like Jordan Peterson or Steve Bannon.
And finally, it lands with mainstream politicians and commentators like Donald Trump or Piers Morgan.
And the key is that the people at the top of the chain don't have to use the explicit, vulgar language. They just use dog whistles.
Exactly. They'll use sanitized phrases, the war on masculinity, political correctness gone mad, feminists are snowflakes, that signal to the online mob that their grievances are valid. It shifts the Overton window. It makes unacceptable ideas seem acceptable.
Like Mike Cernovich, who managed to get his hashtags trending.
He was a master of this. He'd create a hashtag, get his manosphere followers to blast it out, and watch it get picked up by mainstream news. By the time it's on CNN, its misogynistic origins are completely erased.
And someone like Jordan Peterson acts as the intellectual go-between.
He's the quintessential example. He gives an academic-sounding veneer to these grievances, talking about postmodern neo-Marxists. It makes his followers feel intellectually superior for holding these views.
And he profits from the outrage he generates.
He monetizes it.
Right.
When his critics get flooded with abuse, he dismisses it. And then commentators like Piers Morgan give him a primetime platform to do it all over again. As Bates says, the guys at the top don't need to gut the fish. They just hold out the bait.
And the tragic, inevitable result of this whole system is the real-world violence, the body count.
It is. And the link between the ideology and the violence isn't subtle. It's explicit. Mass murderers like Elliot Rodger and Alec Manassian directly referenced incel ideology as their motive.
Roger called it his day of retribution. Manassian said the incel rebellion has already begun.
And what's so disturbing is how the incel community reacts to these attacks. It's proof that it's ideological.
They don't condemn the killers.
They do the opposite. They laud, canonize, and revere them. They call Elliot Rodger a prophet or a martyr. They celebrate the murders. The violence is aspirational for them. It's the beta uprising they've been waiting for.
And Bates also draws a direct line from this ideology to domestic violence.
She does. Because the manosphere's core obsession with male control, power, entitlement over women's bodies is basically the textbook definition of domestic abuse.
And many of these mass murderers have a prior history of it.
A huge number of them do. And it's a fact that's often just left out of the media coverage. Domestic violence is systemic control. She calls it a kind of terrorism, just a quiet, unacknowledged, everyday terrorism.
Which brings us back to the media and political blind spots, the refusal to call this what it is.
It's a systemic failure to name the motive. The media defaults to these isolating narratives: mental health, loneliness. The coverage of Elliot Rodger focused on him being troubled since age 8.
You don't see that kind of sympathetic framing for non-white perpetrators?
Almost never. And by soft-pedaling the misogyny, we prevent any effective law enforcement or prevention response from developing.
We saw the same blind spot during the height of the #MeToo movement.
Oh, absolutely. The mainstream media hysteria often sounded more like manosphere talking points than facts. All this talk of a witch hunt and a false allegation crisis.
Headlines like, when #MeToo goes too far.
And it was all based on this idea of execution without trial. But the facts just didn't support it. Bates cites analysis showing that for the 200 high-profile men investigated, there were over 900 accusers. That's an average of 4.5 accusers per man.
The narrative was completely divorced from reality.
Completely. The justice gap is still enormous for victims of abuse, not for the accused.
And while all this is happening, the grooming of young men and boys continues.
It does. Extremists explicitly target the 10 to 30 age range because they know that's when identities are being formed.
Yeah.
Insecure boys, lonely boys, even boys on bodybuilding forums. They're all prime targets.
They have specific propaganda, like the red pill primer for boys.
A slick 13-part slideshow that teaches boys why feminism hates you and that young white men are their main targets. It's textbook extremist radicalization aimed directly at children.
And yet, the official systems meant to prevent extremism are totally blind to it.
It's a catastrophic failure. Government anti-extremism strategies, like the UK's Prevent program, are almost entirely focused on Islamist extremism. The words gender, boys, or misogyny, they don't even appear in the official document.
It's not on their radar at all.
It's virtually unheard of in those circles, even though it meets every single definition of radicalization. The institutional blindness is just total.
So, connecting this all together, we have to talk about the tragedy at the heart of this ideology of grievance. It actively resists any real solution for the men it claims to be helping.
That's the stark irony of it all. The manosphere and MRAs, they claim to be champions for men, focusing on real issues like male suicide or poor health outcomes.
But when someone offers a real solution,
they attack it. When the American Psychological Association, the APA, suggested that traditional masculinity itself is psychologically harmful and contributes to these problems, the MRAs were outraged.
The APA was just pointing out that men who are socialized to be stoic and suppress emotions are less likely to get help.
A pretty common sense observation. But the manosphere called it a war on masculinity. They are defending the very thing that is harming the men they claim to speak for. It ensures the cycle of pain continues.
Which makes you ask what the real incentive is for the leaders.
Well, the goal isn't to solve the pain. It's to blame women and keep their followers dependent and angry. Bates points out how these leaders profit from it. Paul Elam told troubled followers to go fucking bother someone else unless they paid him.
So it's not about helping, it's about maintaining the grievance machine.
Exactly. They need their followers to believe that systemic discrimination against men is real and that feminism is the enemy.
So what does all this mean for the average guy? The moderate man who would never go on an incel forum, but is still exposed to the sanitized versions of these ideas.
It means the manosphere's greatest achievement isn't just generating hate, it's spreading fear.
Fear of women, fear of #MeToo, fear of progress.
It affects the good, moderate men who would never commit an assault, but are slowly convinced that women are out to take something from them. their jobs, their status, their rights.
And the statistics on that are shocking. Almost half of all American men believe the gender pay gap is just made up.
That is the measurable result of systemic fear-mongering. It makes people reject verifiable facts because accepting them feels like a personal attack.
So what's the path forward? How does Bates suggest we disrupt this system?
She says it has to be slow and sustained. You have to get the whole worm, meaning you have to address the digital ecosystem and the underlying social causes.
Which means addressing the isolation that pushes boys online to begin with.
Precisely. We're seeing the results of decades of cuts to things like youth centers and community spaces. We have to provide meaningful offline social infrastructure. And simple things matter. Boys who have real non-romantic friendships with girls are far less susceptible to these distorted lies.
And the solution for defining a positive masculinity, it has to come from men themselves.
Yes, we need more male role models, musicians, athletes, whoever, to talk openly about vulnerability and to define masculinity in a way that isn't just about being tough and dominant.
Rather than women having to do all the work of telling men how to be.
It has to come from within. And that really gets to the heart of Bates's work. She's trying to harness the energy of the men who've been misled into fearing women by the lies of other men.
What she forces us to see is that this ecosystem is vast, it's connected, and it's operating right out in the open. Ignoring it just increases the harm.
And her final thought is a really provocative one. She suggests that the men who have been misled to fear women, they aren't really afraid of women at all.
What are they afraid of?
They are, in her words, men who hate women. They just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
The question is, how do you get them to see that? How do you activate them to dismantle the very system that's been exploiting them?
That is a deep and necessary question for us to mull over.
Indeed.
We have been deep diving into men who hate women. From incels to pickup artists, the truth about extreme misogyny and how it affects us all by Laura Bates. We highly encourage you to read the book yourself, support the author, or borrow it from your local library. For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description. If you enjoy systems-level analysis like this, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.